So today we are going to move ahead. We want to talk about layouts, right? We want to discuss layouts and how to sort of move the different sections or components of a website to different parts or different portions of the page. For example, you have the banner or the headers at the top. Yes, the footer is at the bottom. Then the individual components inside the page, you also want to move them and reposition them in different parts of the page. So that's basically what layout is all about. We are laying out and repositioning different elements or different components. I'm using the word component because in a component you can have several elements, so many elements, right? So in a particular section, you could have a div, your H1 tags, your H2, your span, your hyperlinks, your unordered list, and all that. So altogether, that section is a component on its own. So you can move that section using different CSS tricks to different parts and different portions of the page. So we're going to be looking at that today. And once we finish talking about layouts, then we can now apply that to another project that we're starting today. I hope we have time to finish it, but yeah, we're starting a new project today. Let me just quickly show the result of that. So this is the application of layout, right? Before now, our Africa Gazette was just, the page just flows from the top to the bottom. No styles, no design, no repositioning of components, no structure. Basically, of course, it has the basic HTML structure, but in terms of look and feel, let me use that word. So what we're seeing on the page now gives us a better look and feel, you know, for a real life project. So this is the project we'll be working on today. Somebody is saying, are we going to do this live? Yes, yes, we'll try to code this live, right? Yeah, we'll begin coding this live, and if we have time, we should be able to finish it. But if not, it's going to be your week 4 assignment, right? So, but let's see how far we can go with this. But first, we're going to start with the introduction, how to use different layout styles in CSS. So that's where we're going to start right about now. Now I've opened week 4 on or in my VS Code, right? So there is a starter, a final or a starter folder, and then a final folder. So inside the starter folder, there is the Font Awesome folder, which also contains the CSS and the web fonts. Font Awesome is a font library that is available online. So for those who are new to web development, there are different font libraries online. There is Google Fonts, there are Font Awesome, so many of them, and you can as well, pay for them as well. I believe, yeah, Font Awesome actually has pro version of it, but here we're going to be using the free version of free icons from Font Awesome library. Then we also have the images folder. There is the fire logo, the PNG, which is what we have here. This is the fire logo. No, this is the Firebuy logo. This one here, there's Firebuy. You can open it here. You can see it's a PNG file with transparent background, Firebuy. And then there's the fire logo itself. Hope you can see this, right? So all these assets are available online. Again, you go to, let me go to GitHub here. So for those who have access to my GitHub account, you see this, you see your starter files available. So this same repo on GitHub, on my GitHub account, if you go there, you have access to week 4. So inside week 4, you see starter, which is Font Awesome, the images, and then the content. This is the content that we'll be using to design that layout. So for those who have access to my GitHub account, you can just download the folder. Let me go back here. You can come here and download as a zip file. You can as well go ahead to clone the repo. So again, this is what we'll be designing today. And then let's come back to our VS Code. So we're going to be starting with, we're using the starter folder. Inside the starter folder, we have index.html, right? Which is our normal boilerplate. So I've added this just to, well, let me do this. So I added this so that we can move faster, right? So basically, this is still just normal HTML, but with CSS classes added here, but they are not yet styled. So we're going to do the styling together. You can see, so the output of what we have here is what you can see on the right hand side. Look at numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is the output, just normal HTML, no styling, no CSS, nothing. So this is the container, and then we have 8 children, right? So 8 children inside this div container. So this is simple for everybody, and we did this last week. How do you refer to your class, your CSS class? You use the class attributes to refer to the name of a CSS class or CSS rule. Let's use the word rule inside, either within an internal file or external file, as we learned last week. Last week we talked about inline CSS, internal CSS, external CSS. So for the purpose of this demo, of this introduction, we're going to do everything internally here so that we can see instead of flipping pages and flipping screens. So I'm going to do this internally here. And how do we do that? Can somebody remind us how do we begin writing internal CSS? If we want our CSS to reside in the same HTML page, what is the tag we use to do that? You can put it in the chat. Anybody? Yes, somebody said style. Yes, style tag. And you put your style tag in between. Yes, that's good. So you put your style tag inside your head. See? Inside the head, right? So here, that means I can come here and do style. Then all the CSS rules can now come here, and then you have them applied to the body of your HTML. So what we're going to do now is let's start with the first class here is container. Who can remind us, how do we declare a class? Yeah, somebody said a period and then the class attribute or name. So yes, so we begin using, yes, thanks Dorcas. So we begin using CSS by a CSS class by the dot notation, the period. You put dot, then container, right? And then you open your declaration block. So inside this declaration block, we want to, let's do a margin of, let's say, 50 pixel. So you can see that there's space around this, what we're having here, 50 pixel. That means 50. So if we do margin 50 pixel, this is the shorthand for margin top, margin bottom, margin right, margin left. That means all around this block element. Remember we talked about the box model last week. So all around this box, this container is a box. There's an invisible box, right? If we let's give it a background color so that we can see. Let's just say, we're going to erase it, but let's just do blue, right? So you can see that box now. So that box, there is the top, as we talked about last week, CSS box model. So the top dimension, the right dimension, the bottom, and then the left. So the margin colon 50 pixel applies 50 pixel to all directions. So at the top, at the right, at the bottom, at the left. Remember we said it moves clockwise, right? So from the top here, it gives you 50 pixel from the bottom to the right, to the bottom, and then to the left. But we're going to remove this. We don't need this. Let's take it off. So I just wanted to show you to all that there is a box there. So let's give it well, okay, let's give it a different color. Actually, let's give it a background color of let's give it gray. Let's do gray, light gray, something like that. Yeah. So this is good. Then, so that's the container. So how about these items, these elements or items? Let's call them items. So we have two classes being applied to each of the items. Remember last week we said you can an element can have multiple classes, or an element can belong to several classes. The example we gave was if you have a group of students in a class in a school, let's say we have secondary or high school class 4 students, right? A student in that class 4 can also belong to another class of students who are swimmers, another class of students who are in the school band, right? So one student can belong to several classes. So, and we said for you to apply more than one class to an element, you must separate them by space. You can see block, space, block 1, right? But now let's style block first. Let's style block again, dot block, open your curly braces. Let's give it a font size. Let's start with the font size of, let's do 100 pixel. Oh, can you see that? So you can see, because the name of this class is block and it is applied to all the children here, block, 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 look at block, 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 block 8 times to these 8 children, then that class will be applied to all of them. So each of these now has a font size of 100, right? Now there is another class. Now when I want to identify each of the elements, right? So the block class applies to all elements. Then we now have block 1 for element 1, block 2 for element 2, block 3 for element 3, block 4, and so on to block 8. So uniquely now we want to style each of these elements that we're having here. Now we have these 8 elements now inside this child container, right? So now let's give each of these elements their own styles. So that means we need a style for block 1. So you are beginning to get the gist now. So block 1 has to be styled. So let's give it a background color. Let's say background color of red. Can see. So because look at this class here, block 1 is only used for the first element. So it's going to style only that element. So it will not style block 2, block 3, block 4, block 5. So let's also style block 2. So let me just copy this and repeat. So block 2, let's do blue, right? You can see. So let's style block 3. Let me rename this to 3. Then let's give it a color. Let's do aqua. Let me see, aqua. Then block 4. Rename this to 4, because if you don't rename it, the CSS will not be applied to it. You can see, if assuming this was like block, let's say block 50, right? There is no block 50 anywhere here in our script, in our markup. So that means that's this CSS element is CSS class is useless. So when you are working and something is wrong, or you are not seeing your desired output, come back, go through your script and see and identify what's going on. So block 3, let's do block 4. Let's give it a color of let's see, barley wood. That's that. Then let's do block 5. Let's rename this to 5. Let's give it a color brown. Let's do brown. Brown. Then block 6, block 7, block 8. So block 6, let's give it green. Let's give it green. Block 7, rename to 7. Let's give it coral. And then the last one, dark cyan, block 8. Dark cyan. All right. So we have all these CSS rules containing their properties, right? And their values. Let me just, so all these, look at, so we have all these rules applied to this HTML element. You can see clean design. We're not doing everything inline, trying to do all the CSS inline here. So, but then we want to talk about CSS layouts. So there are different ways or different types of layouts or different ways of laying out your elements in CSS. The older method used to be CSS floats. We used to have CSS floats, but modern website design now uses the newer types, which is Flexbox and then CSS grid. So we're talking about Flexbox today. Yeah, hopefully in our next class we can do CSS grid, right? So there's CSS floats, there's floats, there is Flexbox, and then there is CSS grid, right? So CSS float just creates your UI or arranges your elements in one dimension, right? Compared to grid, the word grid here shows that you're having something like an array or a two-dimensional array. Just think of your draft. There's this game, your draft board, a grid where you have both horizontal and vertical boxes. So that's the literal meaning of explaining what a grid is. We are having blocks horizontally and vertically in a tabular form. So you can use CSS grid to position your items. You're targeting grid 1, grid 2, grid 4, grid 3, and all of that. It's very easy to position your items using CSS grid. But today we're looking at Flexbox. Flexbox is actually also very easy. Flexbox, like I said, creates or puts your elements together in one dimension, right? So how do you begin a Flexbox component, right? So what you do is, let's go back to our CSS. Remember, we are styling what we have on the right-hand side. Now, the only style we have on this is just background colors. We've not applied any other style. And I think we've applied margin and then background color to the container. So for you to use CSS Flexbox, what you do is that you apply, let me do this here for CSS Flexbox. Let me do this. We're doing this today. So for Flexbox, use the flex display property to a container. So now there is a display property or a display rule in your CSS that has several properties, and one of them is flex. So once you make a container, it can be any container, it can be a div, it can be a section, it can be a UL, it can be an OL, any container. The word container means that that particular element has children. It contains other items, right? So there is no, we don't have a special tag called a container. So this div item here is a container because it contains other items. If you have a UL tag and another list tag, all the list items there are the children of the UL container, right? So once you apply the flex display property to a container, automatically that container becomes a flex box. Now, how do we do that? So let's go back to our container here and let's apply. So there is a property called display, right? Display. Now look at the different options or different values you can use. But there is one called flex. Flex, not flex box, just flex, right? Oh, did you notice something? Immediately we apply the display, the flex property to our container, something happened to the view by the right. All the items are now aligned from left to right. Technically, they are now in a row. So this is the flex direction of row, which is the default direction of a flex box. If you do display flex without specifying the direction of the flex component, by default, it's going to do it left to right or horizontally, or it's going to put it in a row. So you can see. So once you apply a display of flex to the container, like I said, can be anything. It can be an HTML element by itself. It can be a class. It can be anything. It can be an ID. As long as that particular container has children, right? You can apply either your CSS flex or your grid or anything to that particular container, and then that property is applied immediately. Look at, so I made it display colon flex. Immediately, all those items are now aligned from left to right. You can see from, let me adjust this a little bit. I want to show you something now. Look at look at this gray here. Look at this gray. Look at the gray color here. Remember, we made the background color gray. So there is a background color of this container. So take note. Let me comment out this. Can you see the gray is gone because I removed or I commented out the background color of the container. So that means by default, your flex container or the children or the items of a flex container will take the space of those elements. So it will not fill the entire container. So let me undo this again. So that means this container, this big container here, has this space from here to here, right? Because of this background color, we can see this container, this box element, or this box container. So now when I have children 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, assuming I have 9, 10, 11, 12, it will continue like that, right? The content of each of these elements here is 1, 2, 3. Let's say we increase the size of this content. Let's say welcome. You can see how it is being pushed to the right hand side. You can see the width of this first element is now larger than the rest. Are you getting it? So as long as there is space remaining in the container, the flex children or the flex items will continue to expand, based on the length or the size of the content of those children, right? So let me bring this one back to 1 so you can see. So it takes the shape or the size of its children. Now look at the height. Now consider the height of this container. The height of this container takes the height of the highest element. You can see it takes the size of the highest element. Let's demo something. Let's go back to, let's increase the size of element 4. Let's give it a height of say 200 pixel. Can you see? So the container itself takes the size of the highest element, and all the children, all the elements themselves, even though only block 4 has a height of 200 rather, block 3, block 1, block 2, block 3, then block 5 to block 8, no height has been applied. But because they are elements, or because they are flex elements, technically, they are flex elements, they will all grow in size to take the shape or the height of the highest element. But remember, when I did this horizontally, it is not like that. When I did welcome here, you can see only the first element now increased in width, not in height. The other elements maintain their width, right? Look at this, is the width from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, and so on. But for the first element, the width increases because we now have content that is longer, that is bigger. So horizontally, the other children do not take the width of the largest child in terms of width now, right? So, but vertically, take note, vertically, all the children and as well as the container itself takes the height of the highest element. So let's now see what other properties can we apply to this flex container. Remember, display flex automatically makes this container a flex container. So we can now apply other properties to it, to this particular container. The first one is aligning items. Let's see, how do we align items? Let me restore this to 1. Let's make this one 1. You can see. So again, by default, it flows from left to right, right? Well, we'll also talk about axis, or main axis and cross axis. But before then, let's see, how do we align items? We do align items, that's the property. If we do align items, let's do center, right? Oh, what did you notice? You can see all the items have been aligned to the middle of the cross axis. Now by default, when you do display flex, the main axis is horizontal, like we said. It flows from left to right. That's the main axis. Then the cross axis becomes from top to bottom. That is vertically, right? Vertically. So that's cross axis. But what if the main axis was top to bottom, right? That means the cross axis becomes left to right. So understand that. So it is not fixed. Main axis is not usually horizontal. So take note. It depends on the direction of the flex container itself. So if the flex container is from left to right, which means it has the row property applied to it, which is the default value. Let me just demo that here right now. Flex direction is called direction. Default is row. You can see nothing happened because this is the default value, row. So in this case, because it is horizontal, the main axis is from left to right. So that's why all these elements are flowing from left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, from left to right. But if the direction is colon, look at this. Oh, can you see that? From top, it's now flowing from top to bottom, right? Let me comment out this align items first for us to understand. So look at, so it's flowing from top to bottom. In this case, because the direction is now colon, then the main axis is now vertical. Take note. Look at flex direction here is colon. So the main axis is now from top to bottom because we are using flex direction colon. But if we use row, main axis is horizontal, cross axis is vertical. If it is colon, main axis is vertical, cross axis is horizontal. So take note of that. This is very, very important. So it helps you to know how to align and justify items, right? So take note of that. So now, so let's align, let's go back to aligning again. Let me uncomment this. So flex direction row, the main axis left to right. Now look at this definition of aligned items. I hope you can see the pop-up on my window. Remember I said if you hover on a property or on an element within your VS Code, it brings the reference documentation that you can read and have a better understanding of what that property does. So look, it says aligns flex items along the cross axis. Very important, very important. So which, remember, if it is left to right, if the main axis is from left to right, then top to bottom is cross axis. So you can see it's aligning these items vertically. That means aligning them cross axis. Cross axis, that's the meaning. So take note of that. Then you can also align items. Let's see other properties, other values of these aligned items. Let's do flex start. Let's see what happens. Flex start. Oh, can you see? All the items are now aligned to the start of the cross axis. Remember, this is the cross axis. So the start means at the beginning of the cross axis, from top to bottom. Top to bottom is cross axis. So the beginning of it is at this top here. Look at, how about this one? End. Can you see? It's not at the end of the cross axis, right? So it's not at the end of the cross axis. But if we comment this out, you can see it's stretching, right? It's stretching from top to bottom or bottom to top. That means it stretches along the cross axis, and the stretch property is actually the default value. If I do this, let me uncomment this, and let me put stretch here. Align items. There is one called stretch. Stretch. You can see no change. So stretch is the default value for aligned items. Hope we are following. So stretch is the default value for aligned items. While for flex direction, row is the default value for flex direction. Now let's now see how do we justify the content? How do we justify? So we'll now see the difference between justify and align items. Now look at, let's do justify content. Let's start with, there are different, let's do center first. Oh, did you see that? Now let's define what justify content does. It says it aligns flex items along what? The main axis. So the difference, look at, for aligned items, it aligns those items across the cross or along the cross axis. Take note, align items works with the cross axis, and we said cross axis or main axis depends on the direction of the flex box. If it is from left to right, if it is a row flex container, then that means the main axis is horizontal, while the cross axis is vertical from top to bottom. So look at justify content now. I'm doing center. That means it's aligning all the flex items along the main axis of the current line of the flex container. So remember, when you type on, easily remember Microsoft Word. When you're typing something and you want to center line your text, very easy. You justify those things to the middle of your page, of your Microsoft Word document. So this is what this justify is doing. You can see is justifying it, along the main axis, in this case, horizontally. How about another property? Let's try another property. Let me comment it. Let me copy this. Let me comment this out. Yeah, let me repeat it in this way. How about this one? There's another one. Let's do space between. Oh, can you see that? So space between stretches or gives space in between those elements depending on the size of the container. Let me bring this out. Let's make the container bigger. Hope we can still see this. Can you see? Remember, we said the items alone, the items by themselves, they take the width of the content, which means they will not go beyond the size of the 50. Remember, let's go back to this place. Let's check. I think we applied 100 pixel. So for each of these font, each of these elements or items has a font size of 50 pixel. So meaning that this flex element will only have a size of 50 pixel horizontally. But now look at this gap, this space. There's a space, space, and space. So because we're using the property, where is it again? We're using this one, space between. That means it will apply equal space in between those elements. So this is very good, very, very useful. When you want to center a line, let's go back to what we are building today. Look at something like this. If you have something like this, you can use this property to distribute all these elements across each container equally, so that there's equal space in between them. You can see equal space in between them. We'll be using this when we design this. So equal space in between them, and then so let's go back. So space between. How about space around? Let's demo space around. Let me bring this back again so we can see. So you can see. So it depends on the size of the container. Because this flex container, right? As your page is shrinking, the size of the container is shrinking. When we get to what is it again? Mobile responsiveness. When your page change, the viewport changes, then the components of your website should change alongside the viewport of your browser, right? So as this page now reduced in width, you can see everything now came together because it's a flex box. So the container has reduced in size, in width. So let's go back to. So let's try other properties. Let's copy this. You can comment out this. Let's do about space around. You can see. So it gives equal space around each of the container. Let me do this. Let me open a separate page outside, so I don't have to be. So each time I want to demo this, I'll just switch to this page. You can see there's equal space around this element. So space here, the same equal space here, another one here, another one here, another one before 4, after 4, before 5, after 5, before 6, after 6, before 7, after 7. So we can see space around and then space between. So there are different properties that you can use for to justify content. To justify content. Somebody saying, why is the container at the middle? So the container here, look at the container has a margin of 50 pixel, right? If I comment out the margin, look at, so it is going to start from the top. Now remember, it is, let's remove all these properties. All these properties. This is default, this is default. So look at, so this is the container itself. Let me remove this as well. This border. So it starts from the top. Remember, it's a div element, right? Your block element div stretches. It takes the size of its own container. What is a container of this div item? Who can tell me what is a container of this div item? Put it in the chat. What is a container of this div item? Can anybody put it in the chat? Yes, Zainab said body. Yes. So yes, Isaac said body. So the container of this div item is this body tag, this body element here. So remember, it's a div element. If you don't give it a width, if you don't give div a width, it's a block element. It's going to occupy the width of its own container. So that's why this container itself stretches from the left hand side of this display, of this viewport, to the right hand side, right? Now let's try to give it a width. Let's come back to container. Let's give it a width of, let's do 50% of the viewports. Let's just do 50 view width. So can you notice that? Look at, so this means the container has a 50% of its view width, or the viewport alongside, or we can say 50% of the width of this display. If this display reduces to a smaller screen, which is what we're having here. Let me refresh. So we can see this is still 50%, of course, but because it's a flex element, it's going to stretch to the other side. So somebody says the addition of space after 1 and before 2 makes it bigger than the space before 1. Yes. So the space before, let's go back to that. So let me comment this out. Let's go back to what we had before. And then space around. So space around. Look at. So there's this, like I said, automatically the flex container calculates what the space will be. Now let's comment out, because we have 8 items, let's make this 3 items. No, not this. Let's comment out this. You can see. So automatically Flexbox calculates the space that should go around each of those elements, and depend on the size of the container as well. Because the container flows from left to right, of course there's a pattern of 40 around it. It's going to automatically calculate the space before 1, equal space after 1 from here to here, then from here to here to 2, after 2 to the middle, then from here to here, then after 3. So don't be confused, please. All right. So let's go. Let me uncomment this. Then look at this. See, you can see. So because we now have 8 items, then the sizes is recalculated by the CSS, by the flex property. All right. So I was talking about. Let me close this. All right. So we've talked about flex direction, flex container. But let's see how we can apply this now. There's also flex wrap. There's also align content for the container as well. So there are different properties that you can play with, just to test how to use a Flexbox. But now this is what we want to do. We want to develop this, right? How do we begin this? So this is beginning to look like a real life website, right? This is a hypothetical website called Fireby. What they do is that they I'm giving you a pitch. So they do so it's called Fireby. They have software platforms that they sell to developers, right? So, and there is a platform, of course, one of their main platforms is called Fireby. So you can use Fireby to shop online. It's like an extension on your browser, right? To shop online. You can apply coupons to while you are shopping at checkout and things like that. But now, how do we use Flexbox to align all these properties of this all these elements? So that's what we want to do now. All right, so let's continue. So I'm gonna now, because we're working on a project, so we're not gonna use internal CSS. So let me create. Somebody says, kindly explain div tag. Div is just division. It has been around for ages. Is the simplest tag to divide your HTML content into different sections. So div. It says the div element has no special meaning at all. I think we talked about this in our last when we talked about semantic CSS, semantic HTML rather. So we have the header, section, footer, and all that. There is meaning to those tags, but div has no meaning. You can use div anywhere in your HTML. So it represents its children. It can be used with class, lang, title attributes, and so on and so forth. So let's move on. Let me close. Let's give it a different name. Let me close this, and then let's start. Is there a scenario we can have flex direction? Oh yes, I didn't demo that. Flex direction, I think I did. I did flex direction, didn't I? So if you just do flex direction colon here, let's do colon, right? So it flows from top to bottom. Yeah, there are different scenarios. If you want to align any item from top to bottom, you use flex direction colon. That's just it. So if you have children, for example, although this is an unordered list, but yeah, imagine you want to do something like this with a flex box. This includes section. So you can just declare a flex container for this include section and then align your items from top to bottom. But again, you can see you can easily do this with an unordered list. So why do you want to waste your time using flex property to do that? So yeah, but there are different scenarios where you can use flex direction colon. So take note of that. When the default div arrangements are in colon structure, of what use would it be? Oh yes, so div is a block element, so that's why all these elements by default they flow from top to bottom, right? Let's go back here again. Div is a block level element, so all these div they flow from top to bottom, right? So you can do that. But assuming this is not a div element, assuming this is a span, which by default is not a block element. If this is a span, all these items will flow from left to right. Right? Let me just quickly demo that. Let's do span here. Span, and then span. Is not taking effect because remember we've declared this element as flex. So if we remove this, if we disable this, you can see 1 and 2 are flowing from left to right because they are span elements. Span. A span is not a block level element. Take note. It's not a block. So you can make it a block level by using a display inline block. So if I come to this span element now, let me just quickly apply okay, block 1. Let's go to block 1 and do display inline block, or let's just do block. So you can see it's now occupying the entire row horizontally because I forced this span element to be a block element. So take note. Remember when we said last week that every block element flows from left to right and it occupies the entire horizontal width of each container. And if there's any element close to it, that element goes to the next line. So block elements are displayed, you know, there's a new line applied to each block element. That's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, there are different scenarios. So take note of that. Let me uncomment this. Let's go back to what we had before. So we had div and all that. Flex direction is colon. Okay.